Good afternoon, everyone joining us live on Facebook. This is Antonette Richards, the Community Development Specialist at the Planning Institute of Jamaica. And guess what? It's that time of year again when the office and the team at the Community Renewal Program are abuzz with excitement because they are planning the Best Practice Symposium for Community Development. And it so happens that I have here with me Mr. Charles Clayton, and he is the Program Director for the Community Renewal Program. And there's some questions I would like to ask him, questions that you may want to know about the CRP and the Best Practices Symposium so that you can get involved. So, Mr. Clayton, good afternoon. Thank you for joining me.
Good afternoon. My extreme pleasure to be here with you today.
Great. So now we're here to talk we have persons who are joining us live online and they may not know anything about the CRP. And so I want you to first start by reminding us a bit about what the Community Renewal Program is.
All right, thank you. Well, first of all, the Community Renewal Program came into being in 2011 after the social unrest that came. Program that could respond to what led to the kinds of events that happened subsequent to that arrest.
Okay.
And we looked at it and suggested that it needed to have a broader focus, not just West Kingston, because there were many similar communities with similar kinds of antecedents as West Kingston. And so we needed a program that would address these general social issues in this specific community. So out of that, we agreed that we needed a community-based approach. But we also looked at what had been done before by many agencies, and we looked at what the data was showing in terms of where the critical issues were that needed to be addressed. And out of that, we came up with the thought that we needed to have not another program of intervention, because many existed before, but what we needed was a different approach towards community intervention that would ensure that these very interventions would have greater impact and be more targeted. So we determined that what was needed was a coordinating mechanism and information that would help agencies to better target the way they intervene in these communities. So out of that, we shaped the Community Renewal Program. We decided to focus on those communities that we consider to be volatile or vulnerable, as these were the types of communities that gave rise to what happened in West Kingston. And with that definition in mind, a group of specialists, technical specialists from various agencies came together, university, government agencies and other practitioners, and looked at the topic vulnerability and volatility and developed what we call an index, which is a composite number that would measure volatility and vulnerability within these communities. We determined that we should focus on the 5 parishes that had sustained the highest murder rate over time. Those were Kingston, St. Andrews, St. Catherine, Clarendon, and St. James. At that time, there are others in the mix now, but those were the ones at the time. And we overlaid this index of vulnerability on all the communities in these parishes and identified what, by this score, would be the top 100 among them, and said this would be the focus of the Community Renewal Program. We also looked at the subject matter that needed to be addressed, and we came up with 6 thematic areas. Social transformation, which looks at things like behavior, the social environment, social cohesion, the interrelationships in the communities, and also things like the way in which people get exposed towards various kinds of trauma untreated. And said those issues needed to be addressed under social transformation. The next thing would be socio-economic development, recognizing that except we have more people working or employable in these communities, there's no sustainable change that you can make because there'll always be dependency. We looked at governance, which was at the heart of how people make decisions and how they might be led by other people into the wrong pathways, and determined that we needed to have a governance structure which gave back the agencies to the people, and also which was more democratic. We looked at youth development, recognizing that youth are at the center of development, but they're also the center of victimization, and they are some of the main perpetrators of violence as well. And we said whatever we did, we should keep a focus on youth with those other thematic areas looking specifically at youth as a theme. Finally, we recognize that the physical environment actually represents the nature of what is happening. And in fact, our data suggests, and other data suggests that poor sanitation actually has an association with violence, though we don't know how it works. Also, working back to the theory in New York, developed in New York some time ago, that broken environments develop broken kind of disorderly behavior. From that perspective, we recognize that you couldn't ignore the physical either. So we said this was the lens of visibility that we needed to look at in these communities, and there should be a thematic focus of the CRP.
About safety and security.
Well, safety and justice was the sixth. Thanks for reminding. Yes, safety and justice was the sixth area, and of course, this is not speaking to it from a policing perspective. It's really speaking at the community participation in the process of securing the environment and contributing to the kinds of interrelationships that reduces tension and violence. So this is the 6 areas that we said we would focus on, and so we had to develop a mechanism by which we could bring agencies together to collaborate under these themes and specifically identify what can be done to address the issues under these thematic areas.
Okay, you just mentioned the whole thing of bringing agencies together. So could you give me an idea of some of the agencies that you work with under the CRP?
All right, so there's a whole host of them, and I might be leaving out some that are important to the partnership. So at that risk, I'll mention some of them that I can remember. For example, most important in this vision of coordination is Social Development Commission, which is the agency charged with community development in Jamaica. We're actually assisting them in that process, but with our thematic focus on vulnerable and volatile communities. Then we have there's some of the ministries, departments and agencies of government, such as the RHSNT, the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Labour and Social Security, to name a few, and I'm sure I'm missing a couple others. Ministry of Local Government, and we have some non-government organizations such as the foundations, Jamaica National, Grace Kennedy, and a few others. Again, I'm missing quite a few. The National Works, the one that deals with sanitation. NSWMA,
okay.
and
so about JSIF and
JSIF, Jamaica Social Investment Fund, are very critical partners. We have some international development partners. The European Union is a critical partner. USAID through its implementing entities. We have had the World Bank working through JSIF as well, and the International Development Bank is a critical partner, especially in the staging of this particular best practice symposium that we're doing. Caribbean Development Bank is another important international partner, and the United Nations UNDP Development Program is also a partner.
Okay, thank you very much. So I would like you to tell me and all the other persons who are out there watching us, what about the CRP makes it different from all other programs?
Well, two critical things. We are not an implementing entity. We are not trying to duplicate the work of others. What we are trying to do is to bring focus to what they are doing to have greater impact. So we are providing data, first of all, that can assist in better targeting. We are using the data to overlay on the communities to show where the vulnerabilities and volatilities lay, what are the causal factors, and where the weaknesses in the communities are that they need to focus attention if they are going to bring about transformation in these communities. That's one thing. Secondly, we're bringing measurement, which has never been there before. Entities will measure their outputs, but not at the impact outcome level. And it has never been measured in a way that unites it with the overall objective of community change. It's rather in specific areas like persons trained or buildings made or that sort of thing. We are overlaying that with a holistic measurement for community development, and in that context we have developed what we call a Community Renewal Index, which is a composite index that incorporates all the 6 thematic areas and measures as one number how far community has reached in terms of that development. Those 6 areas can be dissected and pulled out of the composite index so we can see which specific area is weakest or strongest. We are right now in the process of testing that by overlaying data on it. We have also have a broader indicator framework which relates to the 6 pillars that are there, and that framework is available for agencies by implementing activities under this framework for them to measure how their inputs are contributing to overall change. And we have worked with agencies and community teams to develop what we call participatory action frameworks, that agencies can see overall objectives and types of activities that will be needed to bring about the change we want in specific communities. And we have done this for about 15 communities. We have another parish that we are supposed to enter, which is St. Catherine, and that same process is to be implemented there.
Okay, thank you very much. So, how long has the CRP been around?
Well, the Secretariat was established in late 2011, and activities started as a pilot program in 2012, actually in Majesty Gardens. Since then, we have developed what we call a strategic implementation plan with the M&E framework and broadened horizon to focus on all of other parishes to ensure that we can at least have a demonstration effect to see the effectiveness of what we are doing.
Okay. So what has been your successes thus far?
Well,
What would you say?
first of all, in developing a mechanism for coordination, in developing a mechanism for measurement, in developing the framework that allows agencies to work, and in testing the pilot in Magister Gardens, there has been individual success there, because there was a period of time when Magister Gardens was divided into two communities. It is not now fully resolved, but it is now reunited as a single community, so that kind of difference doesn't exist anymore. Also, we have managed to bring agencies together to collaborate there. That process is not yet done. There's much more work to be done, but that is a demonstration effect of agencies working together and the kinds of impacts we can have. So those are some of the things that we can point to. And we can point to individual lives that have been affected by some of the individual processes that we have implemented in these communities.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Clayton, I have one more question for you. And this time I want you to tell all the persons out there who may be watching, who may be listening, how can persons or institutions get on board?
Well, I would recommend that they become a part of the interagency networks that are formed across the parishes. There's one for Kingston and St. Andrew, one for Clarendon, and one for St. James. And we hope to develop or be a part of another one in St. Catherine, which will be the focus for actually coordinating our efforts in that parish. So that's the first thing. And if there's any doubt, they can contact us at the Planning Institute of Jamaica here through me. My email address, cclayton@pioj.gov.jm, or any member of the team, or just write to the PIOJ to ask for contact, and we can give them further clarification. But my first step is that we find out how the interagency agencies meet, and it's an open forum where all agencies that are implementing anything in the parish are free to join, become a part of that process.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clayton.
My pleasure.
The professionals. Stay with us, we'll be right back.
Stay with us, we'll be right back. Okay, thank you for sticking around. And guess what? You notice the person in the hot seat has changed. I now have with me the technical specialist responsible for socio-economic development in the Community Renewal Program, Miss Charmaine Brimm. Miss Brimm, tell me, how excited are you about Best Practices Symposium?
I am super excited. I can't wait for this event to begin because it promises to be very informative. It will have quite a bit of networking, interaction between multiple stakeholders. So I'm very excited.
I mean, we have been doing this for how long now?
4 years. This is actually our 4th iteration of the Best Practices.
And it gets better each year, doesn't it?
It gets better every year. We continue to identify good practices in community development, and this is essentially what the symposium is about. You know, it's one of the main mediums that the Community Renewal Program uses to identify good practices both locally and globally and even regionally. And we bring our stakeholders together so that they can learn about some of the good methodologies, the kinds of systems that have been tried, proven, and tested in other areas that has resulted in sustainable change. And that's really our ultimate goal, is that we want to see renewal at our community level.
Okay, so you're gonna now tell me about what can persons expect at this year's symposium. I mean, we're gonna get them excited and logging on to watch this year. So let us know what's happening this year. What's the theme? Who will be speaking? What can we get from this year's symposium?
So let me start by saying the theme for this year is Best Practices, the way forward, right? We want to put our best foot forward at all times. So that will be our focus for this year. We're going to have a very exciting program, starting even with the persons who will be moderating for us. So we'll be utilizing 2 very charismatic and vivacious moderators in the persons of Mr. Dwayne Burbick. He is a part of the National Housing Trust, which is one of our key partners, as well as Mrs. Audrey Williams from the Jamaica Public Service. So the first aspect of our program is going to see us, of course, we always start with prayer. So one of our NGOs, Pastor Bruce Flesher, we're going to be having our own Director General, Dr. Wayne Henry, who will be providing the context for us this year. And we'll also be hearing some remarks from Mrs. Therese Turner Jones. She is the country representative for the Inter-American Development Bank. And one of the big highlights in the first part is that we're going to be having a keynote speaker. He is Professor Erwin Waller, and he is from the International Organization for Victim Assistance. What is exciting about his work is that not only does he have a book that focuses on and recognizes violence, but he's also an expert in terms of violence prevention and victim rights. And again, because the CRP is focusing on the most volatile and vulnerable communities, then it's very, very relevant. So we really look forward to having that. And we're going to be introducing a little entertainment. So we're going to have one of our community groups who will be doing an instrumental for us. And based on our past experiences, we know that this promises to be good. So the rest of the day will take us through 4 different sessions. So we're going to have 4 sessions focused on 4 different topics. So the first session is going to be looking at best practices defined, and this is where we will hear from academia. So we will have the expertise of persons like Dr. Kadawame Knight, who comes out of the Center for Entrepreneurship and Thinking Practices at the University of the West Indies. We'll be hearing from Pisha Bryan. She's the program director here at the PIOJ for the Jamaica National Development Sustainable Unit that looks at Vision 2030 Jamaica. We'll be looking at Vision 2030 as a best practice, because it actually is a best practice. We will also be hearing from Professor Erwin Waller again, but this time he will be bringing us some case studies. So we'll be hearing from him in terms of some of those particular experiences that he has seen throughout the world that are similar in terms of the very characteristic of our own communities, and how those whatever research or practices were applied has worked. Our second session is going to be looking importantly on monitoring and evaluation. Is this an asset or a burden? There seems to be this school of thought that M&E is this burdensome thing. But if we really want to see change this, or to know how we're progressing, then monitoring and evaluation is going to be important. So for that one, we'll be hearing from Mr. Brian Gregory. He is the monitoring and evaluation specialist with the Citizen Security and Justice Program. And that has really been one of the stellar programs that has been rolled out in Jamaica over the past couple of years. We're going to be having Mr. Hugo Castillo, and he is coming out of Honduras. So he's going to be sharing with us the use of baseline studies for project design. And as Mr. Clayton had mentioned before, it is very important that we are evidence-based in our work. So data is going to be very, very important. So that is what we will be looking at for session 2. Session 3 is going to be looking at sustainable planning and development, the key to change. What do we really mean by sustainable planning and development? So that is going to be looking at how we align our programs or processes at the national level. And for that, we'll hear from our very own Dr. Henry, again, who is the Director General at the PIOJ. We're going to be hearing from Mrs. Audrey Sewell. She's the Permanent Secretary within the Office of the Prime Minister, and she will speak to us about the process of public sector reform for sustainability. And then we will hear from one of our NGOs, how do they plan for sustainability? And we will hear from Alyssa Glasgow-Gentles. She is the Executive Director of the Multicare Foundation. And last, but certainly not least, we'll be hearing about coordination as a best practice. So we will hear from Dr. Gabriela Solis. She will bring to us an example of the Mexican model, what has worked in terms of coordination in Mexico. And then we will go on into a panel discussion where we will hear from the Ms. Darlene Morrison. She's the Financial Secretary at the Ministry of Finance and Public Service. We will hear from Ambassador Douglas Saunders, who is the Cabinet Secretary at the Office of the Prime Minister, and we will also hear from Adriana Lavalle. She's the Chief Operations Officer at the Inter-American Development Bank. So as you can see, Ms. Richards, it's gonna be a wealth of information that is gonna be shared. We're gonna be hearing regionally, internationally, what are some of those best practices that has worked, and we are really, really looking forward to seeing what kinds of practices we can actually adopt within our own Jamaican context.
Okay, I realize you have a very interesting mix of speakers. I am excited already. So what I want you to do for me now is to look directly at the camera and tell persons who are out there watching us why they need to tune in to watch Best Practice Symposium.
So, my viewers, I know that you are passionate about Jamaica. I know that you are passionate about how you can contribute to Jamaica's development. And so we're inviting you to log on, come on, join us on the mainstream so that you can hear about what is happening at the ground level in our country. Then you can hear about some of the programs, some of the methods that can be utilized to actually get the kind of transformation that we want to see in Jamaica. After all, Vision 2030 Jamaica is our business. So we invite you to join us, and it's gonna be from 9 a.m. up to 5 o'clock on November the 6th. So we look forward to having you join us online. Bye.
Thank you very much again, Ms. Brimm.
Thank you
Wonderful,
so much.
wonderful speaking to you. So, my viewers out there in Facebook world, what is your response? I mean, you've heard everything. You've heard about the CRP from Mr. Clayton, and you've heard about the Best Practice Symposium. And right now, I'm sure you're supposed to be very excited. As a matter of fact, I'm thinking many of you may be hoping it's actually tomorrow and not all the way in November. But what do you need to do? You need to stay tuned. So the schedule will be posted on Facebook, on the Best Practices Facebook page the day before the symposium. But at the same time, you can also remember, you can take note right now, so if you need to join the live stream at the Best Practice Symposium 2019 and spend the whole of your Thursday with us. Yes, I'm asking for all of that. It's so interesting that you won't want to miss that bit of it. Now, I'm saying thank you all for joining us, and bye. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.